May I remind everyone present that the meeting is being live streamed as well as recorded via the internet, and this recording will be archived for future viewing. Just a few housekeeping rules. Could everybody mute themselves when you're not speaking, and then that helps with any background noise or feedback when others are speaking. If you do wish to speak, could you please put your hand up or use the raise hand function? And then please ensure that all debate is raised verbally, not via the chat, and this is for the sake of the recording. If you've got any technical issues, or you need to speak to either myself or the Democratic Service Officer, Gareth, then put that into the chat function, if you don't mind. If anybody has any difficulty hearing or being heard when you're addressed in the committee, can you either let myself or Gareth know? And if you do have a webcam, then sometimes if you turn that off, that does help with the broadband or Wi-Fi bandwidth. And then that way, then you should be seen, can hear and then be heard as well, even if we can't actually physically see you. So that should hope for that. So I'd just like to extend a welcome to everybody. The Environmental Regeneration Scrutiny Committee, and it's Tuesday the 14th of December. So I'm going to go straight into the agenda. First one is apologies for absence. Do we have any? I know Leighton is running late. Oh no, he's here now. He's here now. Have we got any other apologies?
No, just his baby's also running late as well.
Right, okay, no problem.
He's at the vet's.
Not with the baby, I hope.
Not with the baby.
Okay, I think that's it otherwise, isn't it? I think everybody else is here now.
Just Councillor Morgan, Chair, there's no answer, so I'll keep trying. Right,
because if any, is often he, sometimes he has trouble, doesn't he? Okay then. Well, hopefully he'll be able to join us at some point. Okay, so item number 2 then, which are the minutes of the meeting held on the 16th of November. Are we happy to agree those minutes? Yeah, okay. Yeah. And then item number 3 then, which is to receive declarations of interest, including whipping declarations under the Council's Code of Conduct. So do we have any? None? Okay. So right, straight into the actual agenda now then. So we're going to go to item number 4, which is a reference from Cabinet. And this is the draft Vale of Glamorgan Council Annual Delivery Plan 2022 to 23. And this was presented at Cabinet then on the 22nd of November. So I think, Marcus, you're going to lead us on this.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I drew the short straw today, so I will quickly lead you through on this one. So the annual delivery plan is aligned to the Council's 4 wellbeing objectives contained in the corporate plan. And those are to work with and for our employees, to support learning, employment and sustainable economic growth, to support people at home and in their communities, and to respect, enhance and enjoy our environment. The report which is before you sets out how the annual delivery plan has been developed and the consultation and timetable for the plan. I'll run through that in a little bit once I've just gone through the sort of background to it. So the relevant legislation against which the plan is being developed are the Local Government and Elections Wales Act 2021, the Wellbeing of Future Generations Act 2015. Those are the 2 key pieces of legislation behind documentation. The draft plan provides a bridge between the 5-year corporate plan and the annual service plans produced by every service. And it details the key activities to be undertaken in year 3 of the corporate plan, and it will be published in the spring of 2022. In this year's plan, there's a particular emphasis on a series of cross-cutting themes. Say that after a drink. And the actions across all objectives will contribute to these 6 themes. The first being Project Zero, second, community capacity, third, hardship, 4th, care and support, the 5th being transformation, and the last being infrastructure. Just a little bit around how the plan was developed. It was developed through a series of discussions with the senior leadership team, and the following issues have been considered as part of its development. The Council's performance and expected progress in delivering the annual delivery plan in the last year, in 2021-22. The reshaping agenda, the corporate risk register, our statutory duties, our resources and what we have available to us, the coronavirus recovery strategy, which has also been to the Scrutiny Committee, the draft Public Service Board Wellbeing Assessment, other findings from our regulators, and the views of residents and partners. And then just moving on from there, obviously in the report, there is the timetable attached, which highlights how the plan will be developed. And you'll see that from the 29th of November 21 to the 9th of January 22, there is a consultation on the annual delivery plan, including with the public partners, staff, trade unions, town and community councils, and presentations to all scrutiny committees. In January 2022, the ADP, the annual development plan, will be reported. There will be a response to the consultation feedback, and on the 17th of February, it is due to be reported back to Corporate Performance and Resources Scrutiny Committee in the form of a revised annual delivery plan. Then on the 28th of February, obviously, Cabinet will consider the final draft of the plan, and then the 7th of March, Council will consider final draft before the delivery of the plan over the next year. So I think that's probably, I mean, unless there's any specific questions, I don't intend to go through much more of the detail. Happy to take any questions if I can answer them. But that's about it in terms of the background to it.
Okay, thanks, Marcus. Has anybody got any questions or any comments? No? No, I think it's, you know, it spells it out quite clearly. I think there's a lot of detail within there. Okay, so we're happy to do that because obviously this has come out now to all the scrutiny committees. And if we did have any comments, they would be shared then with the head of policy and business transformation. But we're happy to agree that. So we're happy to agree that plan.
Yes.
Yeah, lovely.
Yeah, happy with that.
Thank you very much. Right, moving on to item number 5 then. And this is a series of 3 reports from the Director of Environment of Housing. I think, Matthew, you're going to take us through all 3 reports. So if you want to start then with number 5.
Yep. Yes, thank you, Chair. Yes, three reports tonight, all with a similar theme. In that obviously money is very tight at the moment, and in the future, couple of years, 2-3 years, only going to get more difficult. So the first report is the budget monitoring report. So this is the report we bring regularly, and it also covers the revised budget for 21-22. So the financial position is up until September, end of September 21 for the revenue and capital budgets. So similar to how we've reported in previous months. So we're still reporting a £1.5 million projected overspend within neighbourhood services and transport, which can be seen in table 2.2 to the report. With regard to the other budgets, so the other services, they're all currently projecting on budget. So the issues within neighbourhood services and transport are, as we've reported previously, mainly within waste collection and also waste treatment costs, which over the last couple of years have spiralled. However, to combat that, obviously we're rolling out the source separated collections, and this is reducing. Well, we're bringing in income for our recycling material now, whereas it still costs £100 a tonne for areas that are still commingled. However, the areas that are source separated, we're now seeing an income for that material. However, it does cost more to pick up that material in resources with labour and transport. It's obviously a slower process to pick it up. So all the other services projected up to be on budget at the moment. The report then goes on to discuss the capital programme, and Appendix 3 shows the full capital programme for this year currently and progress up to the end of September. So there's a few larger schemes, which I'll highlight where there's been changes. So we've had 10,000 Section 106 contribution for Penland Road for a bus shelter. Next one to mention is we've had a revised award from the Active Travel Grant. We're seeing quite a lot of money coming through from Welsh Government at the moment for active travel, and we've now got a reward, a grant this year for just over 2.5 million, and the schemes are shown there in paragraph 2.14. So some of the schemes are already in our programme. However, we've had a revised letter for some further schemes. Another one, the next one, Landmines flood management. Again, we've had a revised award letter, a grant award letter for the design and development stage for that scheme. So that's 85% funded from Welsh Government, 15% via the council's resources. The next one then is the local transport fund. So we've received 327,000 grant for Barrie Dock interchange. That's from Merthyr Council. We received that funding. The next one to mention is 202,000 has been moved from the Barrie Regeneration Project Development Fund to the BSC2 scheme for this financial year for 21-22, and that's to finish off the BSC2 scheme. And also we've had grant funding for works to Cosmeston, so the gateway to Cosmeston. This was previously a capital scheme already in our programme. However, we've now received grant money for that scheme. So we're proposing to move 120,000 from that scheme to a new scheme to improve the play area at Porthkerry Park. And that, that's all to mention for the capital schemes. So yeah, that's a brief overview of that report. So if there's any questions on that report, I'll take the questions now.
Okay, thank you for that. I've got a few people wishing to speak. Ruba, do you want to go first?
Thank you, Chair. Thanks for that, Matthew. I'm not sure, Matthew, this is a necessary question for you, but it was really on the substance of some of the things that you were outlining. So it might be that Emma might want to chip in terms of, you know, when are we going to move to separate recycling? You know, do we have a date in terms of Penarth and Dinas Powys? And secondly, on the active travel, I mean, that seems to me good news on the active travel grant. So when will we have details on the Penarth to Cardiff, you know, travel enhancements?
Okay, I'm assuming, Emma, this is one for you to answer.
Yeah, I can take both of those. Thank you, Chair. So first of all, in terms of when will the waste move to source recycling in Penarth and Dinas Powys. As you know, or at least I hope this committee knows, we're currently building a waste transfer station at Atlantic Trading Estate. We're actually on site and building that. And once that is complete, we'll be able to move to source segregated for Penarth and Dinas Powys. So my current estimate, and I stress estimate because although the building programme is going effectively at the moment, obviously some things can change, would be later next financial year, so probably around September time. But that does depend on a number of things, and Matthew has very well presented the issues we've got with finance, the major issues I've got with finance in my area of a potential £1.5 million overspend. And obviously I need to either try and pull that back in or seek to obtain funding from the council for that. And obviously I've submitted budget cost pressures, etc. for that. So if you know, my job is to try and keep things within budget. At the moment, we're 1.5 million overspent. So we have a couple of options. We either fill that budget deficit, or we have to look at what we do in terms of our service provision. So it'll be really telling what budget we get from Welsh Government moving forward and what we can actually deliver as a council. But at the moment, assuming all is well, assuming all that budget can come, which is what I'm assuming at the moment, we'd be looking at later next year. So that's for the for Penarth and Dinas Powys, and I'm really looking forward to have those on board to make our 70% figure even higher, hopefully, in terms of recycling. So the second point in terms of active travel, I totally agree. We've been absolutely inundated with money. We've been extremely successful. We're an extremely small team in that basically Lisa Elliott is doing most of that work for us. We, as you know, and you'll hopefully receive in January, we're just about to finalise our integrated network maps, or our active travel network maps, which will give an indication for the next few years. Well, it's actually for the next 15, because it's also short, medium and long-term measures of where we're going to be doing work and what we propose to take forward. So Scrutiny will get a chance to have a look at that, I'm hoping, in January, and you'll be able to consider the contents of that map. And part of one of those schemes, or many of those schemes, is Penarth to Cardiff. There obviously are a number of active travel schemes already operating in terms of across the barrage, etc. But there is a larger piece of work which we've identified and which we're working with Cardiff and Newport on, in terms of a larger aspirational link to go from Newport to Cardiff through to Barrie. So that's something we're looking at, and something committee will have a chance to have a discussion about next month. Hopefully that answers the question.
Thank you, Emma.
Okay, thanks, Emma. That was great. Okay, so the next speaker we've got is Vince.
Thanks, Chair. For Matthew, really, the first question was about the 327,000 from the grant from Merthyr. But reading through it, I realised it's probably that they holding the money for the metro and then they dishing it out. Is that correct? Am I in that assumption? And the other question is for Emma. When was the waste transfer depot at the Atlantic first mooted? Because I think this is going on for about 3 or 4 years, if I can remember. Okay, thank you.
Chair, yeah, thank you. I could probably take both questions, if that's all right with Matthew. Is that all right with you, Matthew? Yeah. So the first question is about why we get the money from Merthyr. You're absolutely correct, Councillor. Merthyr act as the dishing out of the capital region money for transport. So the money, that 327,000, is coming via Merthyr for us. But we've obviously bid for it as a council for that interchange. Really, really good new scheme. I'm hoping there's going to be a radio article on that shortly in the next week. Something that we've done as a team. So that's why that's coming. But good news, we're getting money from the capital region to build that. In terms of your second point, sorry, I forgot. It's gone straight out of my head now. Could you just remind me what you said? I didn't write it down.
Yeah, that's okay. The waste transfer depot over Atlantic, when was that first mooted? Because it's gone on. This has gone on for years and years.
It has. So there's been a number of issues with, obviously we've had to do business cases to demonstrate that it's the right decision for us to move to source segregated. And what we've done very sensibly is we've moved our source segregated out in phases. And as you may know, we do have a temporary waste transfer station at the moment at Cowbridge. And we've managed to use that for the first 2 phases of rollout. We've also learned a lot from those first 2 phases of rollout. I'm really glad that we did it in phases. So the waste transfer station has been on the cards, as you say, for a long time. There's been a few issues with it in terms of it's quite a complex process. We need a planning permission for it. We need an environmental permit for it, and we needed to demonstrate to members that it was the right decision to move forward. We're going to be giving a further update report on the waste transfer station and where we propose to go for waste next, and that should give you a really good idea of the decisions we've taken over the last few years, and basically to show you that the decisions are probably the right decisions we've taken in terms of costs. So you're right, it has been going on a number of years, but it's a complex process. And can I just add one final thing in there? SUDS. So sustainable urban drainage systems has caused us a massive delay. We've had to do a lot more work on that, and it has caused a rise in the cost as well of the actual facility. But I put all that behind us. We're on site, we're delivering, and I'm hopeful that it's going to be open sooner rather than later.
Okay, thanks, Emma. You didn't actually answer the question, to be honest, did you?
I was just about to say I probably sound like a politician, didn't I? No, sorry. No, I'm not sure of the exact date, but it's been around a while. I can come back to you on the exact date.
No, it's okay. You gave good enough reasons why it's been delayed. I just think it's quite frustrating.
I was guessing actually that was what you were looking at. But if you, I'll come back to you on the exact date. But it's been a while in the making, and I would agree with that.
Can I just ask one more question while I got the mic on? When's the recycle shop opening?
Yeah, another bit of good news. I'm glad you've raised that. Another really exciting project that we've managed to secure funding for. So I think it's actually arrived on site in the last couple of weeks, and we're hoping to open that within the next 3 to 4 months.
Is that at the existing site now? Is it where the?
Yes. So it's at the, for want of a better word, it's at the front of the existing amenity site in Atlantic Trading Estate. So what you'll have when we finish there is you'll have the recycling depot. So where the tip, most people call it, but that's where you take the stuff there. You'll have the waste transfer station, and you'll have the reuse shop. So the reuse shop there will have great synergies with maybe what people take to the tip, and hopefully some of those items we can get repaired. Some of the larger items in particular we can get repaired, and they can be sold on or sold on to people, particularly people in need, I think at a lesser cost. So I'm hopeful the next 3 to 4 months, lots happening on that. And again, when this revised report comes to Cabinet and hopefully onto committee, you'll obviously be able to have a chance to have a scrutinise of those actions that we're undertaking in terms of that work.
Great. Okay, thanks a lot. Thanks, Chair.
Okay, thanks, Emma. Right, I think the next speaker then is Gwyn.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I got 2 questions for Emma, actually. The first one is paragraph 217, St Athens Station investigation work. I really asking, is any progress on that of a location? And the second question is on Appendix 3, and it's concerning Boverton flooding, and it's 41,000 discussion taking place to resolve issues with Welsh water pipe. Information on that, please.
Yep, I can take both of those, Chair, if that's okay with you. So the first St Athens Station, yes, there is progress on it. We have let a study to look at the possibility of where a station might be located. As you'll probably know, Councillor John, there was previously a Jarlston Holt, but unfortunately there's development there now, so we need to have a look around the area to see where the most appropriate location might be. Now, when that study comes back, I don't know whether it's going to say there is an appropriate location or whether it's going to say there isn't, but whatever it says, we will need to consider that and decide whether we want to take it on to the next steps, which would be to prepare a business case and also to put it forward in terms of the work that is happening at the Regional Transport Authority level in terms of the Metro Enhancement Framework. So it's good for us to get that piece of work done now. It's a very short, sharp piece of work. I'm expecting a draft report mid-January, and from there, obviously, we can decide how we take that matter forward. So that's St Athens Station.
Lovely, thank you.
Is that okay, Councillor John?
Yeah, that's great.
That point?
Yeah.
In terms of Boverton flooding, yes, you're right. There is an issue with Welsh water, and there's potentially an issue with the build of what has happened there, and there may need to be some adjustments made to what has happened there. Perhaps I can take you through those, Councillor John, offline, if that's okay, and I can explain exactly where what the position is.
Yeah, fine, that's great.
Some of it's a little bit legal.
But I speak to you tomorrow, because I need to speak to you on another issue as well.
Yeah, that's absolutely fine. Let me know when's convenient. Maybe drop me an email and I'll do that separately, if that's okay with you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Gwyneth. Thanks, Emma. Andy?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I put my hand down just now because I had my hand up, but I put it down because Vince actually asked the question about the Barrie Dock interchange and the 327,000 which has been taken from the Metro Plus programme. I was just wondering, what is that exactly is the process for that? How do we tap into that money, and how available is it? Can we use that for many other projects in the Vale? Or, I mean, I haven't heard very much about applications from funding from that scheme. So how does it work? Thanks, Chair.
Okay, Chair, do you want me to take that one as well?
Yes, please, Emma.
Sorry. So as you know, Councillor, there's the Regional Transport Authority, which in turn feeds into the Cardiff Capital Region. And as part of the Regional Transport Authority's remit, they look at what are regionally important schemes. And Barrie Docks Interchange and also Cogan have come up as two very important potential schemes to move forward for the Vale. So that's how those schemes have come forward. You'll also know that the Barrie Docks Interchange is also an aspiration within the local development plan. So again, that's a scheme that's on the books that we've looked to take forward. Now, if there were other schemes that you were thinking about, what you'd need to demonstrate to tap into that money, the regional money, would be obviously the regional significance of it and what difference it would make to the region. But there are also other pots of transport money which you can tap into. First, you really need to be influencing the plan process, so either the local development plan process or the regional transport plan process. And obviously, as members, you'll have a role in determining what is within those plans moving forward. So, for example, if you wanted, let's just say, a park and ride in Dinas Powys, just to have something random, if you could demonstrate that was of regional significance, then you could potentially go through Cardiff Capital Region funding. If it was something more of local significance, we could potentially, if it fitted our policy and where the council wanted to go, we could potentially put it through local transport fund process. So there's lots of different processes depending on the project, and as a transport area, we're always looking for those opportunities, and when we see those opportunities, we'll obviously try and take pick them up.
Yeah, thanks, Emma. That's very helpful. I think you probably know where I'm coming from.
I don't actually. So, you might have to spell it out for me this evening. Apologies.
Well, there's a particular issue in Dinas Powys we'd like to go after still.
So are you talking about the Dinas Powys bypass, Councillor?
I am, but it's obviously a lot more money than we're talking about here.
It is, and also obviously there's a policy stance now with Welsh Government regarding new roads, which is probably a bigger constraint to any pots of funding that are available. The hierarchy now is looking, the transport hierarchy is obviously looking at active travel, etc. before any roads. And you'll have seen a lot of publicity on the news about lots of bypasses that have actually been stopped just before construction because there's been a determination now that that's not the policy that Welsh Government wants to follow. So
yeah, I sorry, Hannah, I have seen that, and I think the Welsh Government's going to have to change its stance, actually, but there we go. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Andy. Right, we've got no other questions. I think all the questions were for Emma anyway, so thanks, Emma, for stepping in and answering those. So are we happy? Is the committee then happy to note the revised budget for 2021-22? Yes?
Yep.
Okay. Okay, do you want to do the second report then, Matthew, which is the initial revenue budget proposals for 22-23?
Yep. Thank you, Chair. Yes, so the recommendation of the next report is that the initial revenue budget proposals for next financial year be considered, and any recommendations, including those related to cost pressures or any savings, are then passed back to Corporate Performance and Resources Scrutiny Committee as the lead scrutiny committee on the budget for next year. So as you'll all be aware, the council's budget is largely provided by funding from Welsh Government. In recent years, the issue we've had in setting the budget for the future financial year is that we're not getting the provisional settlement from Welsh Government until, due this year, 21st December, and then the final settlement not due until 1st of March. So obviously that throws up a few challenges when trying to set the budget for next year, and that at the moment we don't know what the Welsh Government funding is going to look like. So and we're under pressure to obviously fix the level of council tax, and this has to be done by statute by 11th of March. So this is why we start the sort of consultation and asking for services to highlight any budget pressures for next financial year. So we start that conversation early. We're also doing public consultation at the moment as well around the budget. And then obviously all that will feed into work that the budget working group will undertake when we have a better idea of what the settlement will look like from Welsh Government. So obviously added the usual pressures on the budget. Obviously we've had pressures due to COVID over the last 18 months, and there's also at the moment we don't expect the COVID hardship fund to continue into next financial year. So obviously that could also bring pressures to services throughout the council. So in order to give some sort of idea of the level of shortfall that we're currently projecting for next financial year, we've run through a load of different scenarios based on different funding from Welsh Government and different levels of council tax. So the range runs from 23 million shortfall over the next 3 years. That's assuming a 4.42% increase from Welsh Government, which is the same as we had last year, and also a large council tax increase, which would take us up to the Welsh average, so it's just over 7% council tax increase. With both those things, we're projecting we just have a £23 million shortfall over the next 3 years. A worst case scenario, assuming a 1% budget reduction from Welsh Government and a council tax increase of only 3%, just over 3%, we'd then be looking at around a £43.7 million shortfall. So you can see that the numbers are particularly large, and we're currently trying to work through the cost pressures to find ways of mitigating them or reducing those cost pressures. But as I said, services are under severe pressure, and we've already highlighted in the previous report the pressure on waste management service. So just for information, a 1% increase in council tax equates to around just over 800,000, and a 1% increase in Welsh Government funding equates to around 1.7 million. So obviously, depending on how much we get from Welsh Government, can vary our budget quite significantly. Summary overall base budget for next year for this committee at the moment is shown at Appendix 2. So for now, that just builds in inflationary pressures on pay, but doesn't include the cost pressures. So the cost pressures for the council as a total are 22.5 million for next financial year. So that's just the cost pressures submitted by the services, and around 6 million per year after that. And for this committee, the cost pressures that have been submitted are around 2.8 million for next financial year. So nearly 10% the overall for the council. So in view of the deficit, the budget working group are obviously looking at all the cost pressures and looking at obviously various ways that we could either fund those or reduce the cost pressures, etc. But as I've highlighted, this significant this year, so obviously not an easy task at all. So the next steps are for each scrutiny committee to look at the cost pressures within their area, and like I said, if there can be any suggestions for how to mitigate these or reduce them downwards, or proposals for savings to offset some of these pressures. And then these comments will be fed to corporate resources scrutiny, and then back to the budget working group then to discuss and then feed into the final budget proposals. So at the moment, the current, as I said, the current projected date that we'll get the provisional settlement is 21st December. So it's then proposed that the initial budget proposals will go to Cabinet on the 14th of February. This report will then go to corporate resources scrutiny on the 17th of Feb. Any comments will then feed back into the final budget proposal report on the 28th of Feb. And then all being well, the final proposals will go to full council on the 7th of March in time for the council tax to be set by the 11th. So obviously a lot to be done, quite a short space of time to work through all that information, especially when we get the settlement from Welsh Government. Obviously, it takes time to unravel the settlements that we received, or the provisional settlement. So that's why obviously we're doing a lot of the consultation now. The report also goes on to highlight the financial reserves that fall under this committee. Obviously, we do depend on our reserves quite heavily, especially of late with the pressures in some of our services. So currently for this committee, our reserves at the start of this financial year were about £11 million. However, by the end of this financial year, we're projecting they're going to reduce to about £5 million. So we're using around 6 million of those just in that financial year. So obviously, you can see that our reserves are reducing, and not really a way to fund some of these ongoing pressures. Obviously, we need to come up with different solutions to fund our ongoing pressures. So that's a brief sort of summary of the report. The pressures are all shown at Appendix Appendix 2, is it, or 3?
The cost pressures.
Oh, sorry, Appendix 1. Appendix 1. So that shows 2.8 million cost pressures. As you can see from there, they're highly, most of the pressures come from within waste management, and then the next biggest is the highways service. Obviously, pressure on pressure on filling potholes and obviously keeping the highway up to a suitable standard. There's also some pressures with the regeneration department, and they're looking to fund new structures within that department, which will hopefully bring in grant funding. But obviously, to do that, obviously we have to fund the upfront costs. So that there's significant pressures within the service, and any comments that the committee have, obviously, will be gratefully received, and we can feed them back.
Okay.
So, any questions on the report or any comments?
Okay, thanks, Matthew, for that.
No, thank you.
Obviously, it's very, very challenging times at the moment, and obviously it's a challenging budget to set, and many unknowns and uncertainties at the moment until you get some of those figures. But you've got some significant challenges there. And obviously, I think it's worth mentioning again about that understanding about reserves, about the restricted reserves, and obviously then the general reserves as well, because I don't think everybody always quite understands it about how those restricted reserves are ring-fenced, usually for projects, or it could be salary. And I think it's just worth highlighting, I think, around that understanding around that as well. But yes, significant pressures there, and it's not an easy task to set, or it's not going to be an easy task to set that final budget. I got a couple of people wishing to speak. Gwyn, did you want to go first?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Yeah, well, it's the most challenging time probably we've had for a long, long time on this council, and quite honestly, we're not going to be able to do very much tonight with this, because until you actually know what we're likely to get from the Welsh Government and where we can work out from there. So quite honestly, I mean, I attended Healthy Living Scrutiny, and the demands on the cost pressures there are huge. And quite honestly, with the 27 million talked about this year, we're in a difficult situation. So I would suggest that we just pass this on at the moment to corporate resources. Obviously, some of these figures here, we're not going to be meeting all these challenges, but at the moment, it's going to be down the line, I think, back to the budget working group, where we really need to fund the most to advantage to the council. So I would say that we should just refer this report on, as we are not in a position to make any decisions at the moment.
Okay, thanks, Gwyn. I think it's also worth highlighting with people as well, as we're all aware, is how much of the budget is actually has to go to sort of education and then social services, because these are our statutory services. And in a way, we're probably a bit at the sort of sharp end as well, because obviously a lot of our services are not statutory, and we have to protect those statutory services. So it's not an easy balance then to try and find those savings, and also, look after our residents in the Vale of Glamorgan. So yeah, it's a bit of a juggling act. Ruba, did you want to speak next?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I mean, really, just to echo what you and Gwyn have said, really, about the cross pressures across the council, and those services, like health and education, which are also at a critical point as well. But really, it's because I know Emma and you and your team are incredibly good at finding money as well. So I have hope there in terms. I know you're not going to, not necessarily the whole, the whole lot. So I do have hope there, because I know, you are always kind of out there looking for that and looking for those opportunities. But I suppose my comment rather than the question is that what I hope is, because the cost pressures that this, the things that we scrutinise are facing are pretty essential to the whole project of, the Zero project and, the environment. So, in a way, we've always, since I've was elected to council in 2017, this you've been at this, obviously not at this amount, but you've been at this stage almost constantly, I think, in terms of moving to the moving the recycling to separate recycling, building our own depot and so on. So these are all good things, and we mustn't lose sight of actually, at the end of all of this, we will be saving money and we will be contributing to one of our objectives around the environment. So I suppose that's really that I want to see this sort of go ahead. I'm always banging on about trees as well, Emma. All of this, these will all be costs. It's all about bits of these about spending money, and we mustn't lose sight of the end project of all of this in terms of the environment. So that's really what I was going to say. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Ruba. Yeah, I mean, the cost pressures are really at the centre and the crux of this whole issue, isn't it? So, and we've got those highlighted there in Appendix 1. Andy, did you want to speak?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I mean, we go through this every year. I mean, to a lesser or greater extent. There seems to be a greater extent. I'd just like to ask Matthew, how is it we're suddenly more than 10%? Over budget? I mean, basically 28 million, I think, represents 10% of the whole budget. We keep getting told that the council is imminently about to go bust, and then miraculously that seems to disappear. I'm not saying that the council isn't under huge financial pressure. We all know that it is. But I mean, I'm not sure that we can take seriously that this is a realistic projection. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Andy. Matthew, did you want to comment or respond to that?
Yeah. So the shortfall that's highlighted in the report is based on funding all the cost pressures throughout the council. Obviously, as is suggested, some of these cost pressures won't be met, or they'll be mitigated. But just for information, the cost pressures in education are over 4 million for next year. There's social services are over 10 million. So 10.3 million just for next year. So obviously these may not fully materialize. A lot of them are based on obviously the COVID grant falling out, but possibly that it may continue in certain areas. I know there's a suggestion it may continue in areas such as homelessness and things like that. So this is very much a sort of worst case. These are all cost pressures we would require. We're fully aware that not all of them can be met, and that's the process the budget working group has to go through to whittle them down or find savings to obviously offset some of these pressures. Hope that's okay, Councillor Robertson.
Okay, thanks for that.
Sorry, it takes me a while to. Thanks for that, Matthew. I know, like I said, we know we're all under pressure. The whole country's under pressure. It's not just councils, it's the private sector. Everybody's having a bad time of it. But I mean, we've got to be realistic about this, and I don't think saying that our budget's going to be 28 million over is actually even vaguely realistic. Thank you, Matthew.
Okay, thank you for that, Andy. I've got Councillor Lisbonette and Councillor Neil Moore wish to come in to speak. Is there anybody else on the committee who wishes to speak at this point? No? Okay. Liz, did you want to come in next?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, if I could. It's an interesting one because I had much of the same conversation in the Learning and Culture Scrutiny when, as you've just mentioned, the education budget is 114 million of our total budget. And if you actually look at schools, which take 98 million of that, that's 38.8% of the total budget. And social services, as you mentioned, is 28.1%. So everything else comes out of the 26% or 67 million. It is worth mentioning that, you know, whether as a result of COVID or Brexit or whatever, costs have gone up hugely. I mean, that's why we're looking at a base inflation rate of 4.2% currently. So that is affecting the whole country. We are not immune to that. But on top of that, if you look at the national insurance contributions that will be facing this council from next April, from the increase in national insurance, that means a £1 million extra cost for this council. So if you look at what that means in terms of potential council tax increase, that's over a 1% council tax increase to pay for that £1 million just on its own. So we are talking reality here. And if we don't do anything, then potentially the 27 million is very real. And that's why these discussions are very, very difficult. I mean, we've been working in a context of austerity for 11 years now, and you can't cut services to the bone without it having an impact. And to cope with that level of cut, that level of austerity, you have to be innovative and you have to be ambitious, and that's what we want to be as a council. And one thing that was really interesting, I was actually quite amused to see that Big Fresh got a mention in Westminster today. But when you look at an innovative service developed in this council that turned a £350,000 deficit into a £500,000 surplus in its first year of trading, still maintaining public services within this council, that demonstrates the direction in which we need to go. But we also need to find ways of doing that. So as I said, we've got huge pressures ahead of us. A lot of those cost pressures for these areas are, as exactly as you said, they're not statutory. So the discussions are very, very hard, and we need to be discussing what those priorities will be for us as a council, even before arguably we get the figures through from Welsh Government, because then we're just moving pennies around. We actually need an underpinning strategy first. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Liz. Neil, did you want to come in?
Yes, please, if I can. Liz has said quite a lot of what I was going to say anyway, to be honest. I have to say this is probably the worst budget that I've ever seen in my 33 years here. However, and I know that Andy said something about councillors going to go bust. Well, nobody's ever said that, sorry. We won't let that happen. We're not going to have a section 149 notice issued on us if we can possibly help it. But one of the things you have to realise is Liz has pointed out the like 45% on learning and skills and 28% in social services, 26% on the rest. But what I want you to do, and what the purpose of this really is for you to look at the cost pressures and to say, well, what do you think could come out of there? And not just say, well, leave it to the budget group, because that's fine. That's me, thanks. But because the point is, if you look at this, you look at your cost pressures, you've got £2.8 million worth of cost pressures. But you have to remember that you've already used unplanned reserves of £1.5 million for this year. And then if you also look at the reserves, now in the past, the neighbourhood service reserve, one of the things we try to do is always sort of prop it up as far as we can. But at the beginning of this year, it had 3.39 million quid in it. And at the end of the year, it's going to have 393k in it. Because we're using that much of the reserves. I know and that's the point of reserves, and that's something we need to come back to. Is the reserves are there for a purpose, right? Now we're using them, but some of these reserves that we're using this year are used just to balance the books. Now, what we got, what really you need to do, and it's not happening, it never happens, is that committees need to look at what the cost pressures are and see if they can mitigate them. And one of the ways of mitigating them, I was thinking about it the other day, is actually probably what we need to do is something I did a couple of years ago, was went through all the budgets and said, right, what are we doing at the moment we don't have to do now, or we shouldn't do, or we can't do, or we need to consider, do we need to do it? So this is quite serious, to be honest, and you know, we put some scenarios in there in terms of how much money we're on there, and that's why we put in the consultation to be as wide as possible, because we've said things like, well, when we did the medium-term financial plan, we thought we were going to have 3.9% rolling as a reasonable council tax to try and catch up. But CPI this last month has been reported is 4.2%, so that's not going to catch up at all. And the other thing is something that I've gone on about for years, is that we don't meet the Welsh average council tax. And if we did the Welsh housing council tax, that would be an increase of 7%, 7 point something percent. And if we actually met our standard spending assessment, which is what government say we should be spending, that would be a 13% increase. Now, there's no way I'm suggesting that at all. But all I'm trying to do is highlight the fact of where we are. And I think, you know, and that's why I've actually put in an extra corporate performance within the timetable this time, because I really don't know what we're going to be able to cut to balance the books. And that's one of the things we have to do. We have to have a balanced budget. So what really everybody needs to do is look at what the cost pressures are and see whether or not, do we need to do that? Do we not need to do that? Is it something we're doing now that we could stop doing? It's a question. And I'm sorry to be kind of negative, but it's reality, that's all. So, and I know Andy's come back in, so he's probably going to say something else now. So thank you, Chair.
Okay, thanks, Neil. I mean, it is over the years, as you said, we've had 11 years of a lot of big cuts across all councils, not just here. And it really, the easy savings have all gone. They've all been done. And I think the last time we had a huge review, if I remember rightly, Neil, was when we actually did things around the libraries and those sort of services and how difficult that was. And we did actually find an alternative way of delivering a lot of our library services. We kept some of the main ones, but actually, after a few sort of teething problems and some support for the council, we did actually achieve then what I think is actually a better way to deliver those services within our communities, and they've actually become little community hubs. So that actually developed. So sometimes thinking outside the box can achieve the stark reality of what we've got to do, but also still making sure that those services are within our communities because they're so important. Andy, did you want to come back in?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I thank you for that, Leader, as well. I really appreciate the amount of pressure that you and the rest of the council, the cabinet and the officers are under. I can save you £500,000 a year straight off. Basically, scrap the 2 new directorships and don't give councillors a 17% increase in their allowances. Also, on a more serious note, I know you'll say that was facetious, but it wasn't actually. On a more serious note, what happened to the reshaping of services? That was supposed to be saving us an awful lot of money, and it seems to have fizzled out. Thank you.
I come back.
Yes, Neil. Yes, please.
It was a bit facetious, I think, to be honest, on the basis that we have had reshaping and we have done things, and one of the things, and Liz has mentioned Big Fresh. That's working totally outside the box. The chair, Bronwyn, has talked about the libraries, and we had to do that. That was a big thing we had to do, and we did it. So we did save money. We've tried to do it lots of other ways, but the problem we've had is that our funding to the councils throughout Wales has been cut. We've had COVID, which hasn't helped. But you talk about don't have the directors. That's a decision we've already taken. There's no point going back on that. And the reason we wanted those extras because we have all these big issues to deal with. We need to have a strategic overview in order to actually make sure that the reshaping services works, to make sure that we actually meet our policies in terms of net zero, climate change, etc. We have to have a proper strategic management to do it, because one of the things we did in the past because of all the cuts was we cut our management, and we just cut it too much, right? As simple as that. And in terms of the councillors' allowances, we don't set those councillors' allowances. They're set by an independent remunerations panel. Now, the fact that they've come up with this 17%, which is amazing, I have to say, but it's something that I know that some people have said over the last several years. Do you realise how much work the councillors actually do compared to some other people who are elected elsewhere, particularly on regional lists and things? But the point being is that that's not down to us. We took a decision many years ago, and in fact, I'll tell you, it was your leader when you were in control took the decision. We would, as a council, accept the recommendation of some of the IRP because it's independent. Now, it's up to you if you don't want to take it. You don't have to take it. You can say, I don't want to take anything. It's up to you. I think, but the IRP has always said, the independent remunerations plans have always said that is a negative act, because what you will do is stop ordinary people considering to be a councillor, because it does take a lot of time. And if you start working out how long some people are working and work out per hour, then I tell you what, sometimes it isn't meet the minimum wage, that's for sure. Because I tell you what, especially during the pandemic, some of us have been working 24/7, and like this morning I got up, I woke up at 4 o'clock and I started on my emails at 6 o'clock. So, you know, people work long hours, whether you like it or not. Now, if you don't want to take the money, don't take the money, it's up to you. But I think that's detrimental to those people who are trying to come forward in the future. This is just a reality check, and if people don't accept this reality check, then fine, that's no problem. I haven't got a problem with that, but we've got to balance the books, and at the moment, I really don't know how I'm going to. Sorry. So,
Chair, could I just say thank you very much to the leader for that. I do appreciate, as I said, the enormous pressure he, in particular, is under, and the difficulties that the whole council faces. I understand about the independent remuneration panel, but there must be a way. I mean, this doesn't send a good message to the residents of the Vale of Glamorgan. And we must do something to ameliorate that, I think.
Okay, thank you, Andy. But obviously, the biggest issue we have to do is look at the cost pressures. Councillor Peter King, do you want to come in?
Yes, if I may, Chair, thank you ever so much. I'll keep my views about the independent remuneration panel to myself, but suffice to say I was stunned. It was picking up something that Councillor Robinson had said about reshaping, and I have to say that my focus, neighbourhood services and transport, my portfolio area, I feel really sorry for them, because they bust a gut to do all sorts of things within that reshaping that seem to have been incredibly frustrated by circumstances beyond their control. Obviously, coronavirus has caused all sorts of extra costs and burdens and difficulties to everyone and everywhere, so I'm not singling that out. Whether it was Brexit or whatever, I don't know, but the price of energy has rocketed, and the price of electricity to councils, I think what's happened is the generators, or the distribution firms, whatever they're called, I think they have bumped up the commercial price of electricity to try and keep the price of domestic electricity down, because the huge task of converting the lighting across the Vale to LED should have saved us a huge amount of money. And as far as I can judge, the saving in energy has been totally frustrated by the hike in the fuel costs. Now, I comfort myself because whatever else, we're still generating 70+% less carbon, and we've got lamps that will last longer. So I tell myself it's a net balance, but it didn't save us a penny. And because the price of fuel has escalated, the price of transport's escalated. And because the price of transport has escalated, almost everything we buy is costing more. And Emma made comment about the reuse place. Because we were delayed because of coronavirus, the tenders for materials and building materials, everything just keeps on climbing and climbing and climbing. And at previous scrutiny committee, we were really chuffed by how wonderful the residents of the Vale have been at recycling. And Matthew was speaking earlier about how we get a certain amount of income from our source segregated materials. And I joke about aluminium lager cans. Please drink as much lager as you can. Glass doesn't help me at all. Aluminium does. Thank you. But the quantity has gone up. So we're collecting more, and we're having to process it, all right, the material prices vary, but everything has just cost so much more, and all the reshaping efforts in the world, I really do not know where the efficiencies are. And I feel for Neil and Liz because they are substantially responsible for the statutory stuff. But I feel for my guys who do not have any statutory protection. But you go and tell somebody in the street that you can't collect their rubbish, or you can't fix their road, or you can't fix their street light, or you can't collect their green waste. It's a tough one. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Peter. Liz, did you want to come back in?
Yeah, if I could, Chair. It was just two small points. One is there was no shouting and there was no objection when the independent remuneration panel cut councillors' allowances by 10%, not that long ago, and that was accepted in a similar way as increases. And it's not across the board. They've basically taken this lowest sort of denominator. So just to say, decreases are accepted as much as increases. But what I would like to add in is there are some serious issues. I mentioned about cost increases from things like COVID and Brexit. There are few areas of this council that haven't been touched. I mean, I always talk about the sparkle dust that is Creative Rural Communities. A number of years ago, when there was a hiatus in the funding of European funding, we stepped in and kept the team together. And in that time, they not only worked on the community library projects, they also looked at how we access grant funding. From some of that work, the Creative Rural Communities, the Stronger Communities Fund was born. We've accessed a tremendous amount more external funding. They headed up the structures to support outside bodies to access approximately £1 million in community renewal funding, and they will probably be pretty essential with their expertise in terms of looking at where we go with the levelling up funding, etc., going forward, because we will be more and more reliant upon that sort of sources of funding. But there's the rub, because they're European funded, and that funding stops, and they're not statutory. So we can look at the statutory stuff, and we can look at things that, you know, maybe aren't the huge millions of cost pressures that we could find in education, we could find in social services, but we can find small amounts of funding that, if we don't replace that we have lost through the withdrawal of EU funding, the work that has been so essential in our rural communities, building the capacity of those communities, then we will take a step backwards. So I just wanted to flag up that actually it's not all big sums of money. There are smaller sums of money that are going to be absolutely crucial going forward. But as you know, I agree with the leader. At the moment, I have no idea where that's coming from. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Liz. Leighton, you were waiting to speak?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. It was just something Councillor King mentioned about the LED lights, and basically I understand the council's at the present is 70% has been converted, but I know the target was about 90%. Obviously, if we did 90%, then we would have more, you know, I'd say a little bit better of the savings. But was it meant to be completed on the 8th of November? I just wanted to know, have we hit the 90% yet, or are we still at 70%?
Okay, I'm not sure. Peter or Emma could answer that one.
I'll make an attempt while Emma probably rummages through her files to get a more accurate date. You're right, Councillor Rowlands. There's about 10% of the lamps that are, for want of a better word, fanciful or pretty, and are not so easy to replace. Notably at our resorts, we diverted the gangs to doing, my language again, the highway engineers will kill me for what I'm about to say. If you talk about road lamps being the blooming tall ones and street lamps being the short ones, we didn't complete the work on streets when we decided to start the work on roads. Because there's a street very close to where I live that irritates the hell out of me with its sodium lamps left. So there is certainly some tidying up to do toward the end. But I think we're a lot closer to our target than the 70% you mention. I don't know whether Emma's got any better figures, but I'll certainly look. I'll certainly try and get a written response to the committee on that one, because it's a good question, one I'm constantly chasing up and asking about. Thank you.
Do you want me to pick that up, Chair? Just to enhance Councillor King's answer.
Yes, please.
Which was excellent, to be fair to him. So we have completed the Say Let's Roll Up, and we are around that 90% now. There was delays. There was a number of reasons for that. The pandemic hasn't helped the position in terms of resources. One thing I'd just like to say, if we hadn't have taken that move to LED, our energy costs would be a lot more than they will be under LED. So the decision to move to LED, in my professional view, was the right one of the councils, in that they use less energy, so obviously that's good in terms of a carbon zero perspective. But also, if we had have taken that move, our energy cost pressures would be even more than they are now. And they are higher than we originally considered, but that's because the price of wholesale energy has gone up a lot. But if we hadn't have done this, they'd be even higher. So the delay hasn't been ideal, but there are reasons for that. But we are there or thereabouts. And Councillor King says the pretty nice ones. Oh, I just call them the ornamental ones, which are the sort of the 10% that we have the issue with. And our next stage is to go around and have a look at what we've got left. We've done the residential areas, we've done the main highways. We need to go around, double check everything that we've done. But from my view, it's a massive achievement that the council is at that figure after a long process. So I'd just like to thank the committee for the support on that, because I think it was a really good decision to take.
Okay, thank you, Emma. Peter, do you just want to come in?
Very quickly. I do appreciate the correction to ornamental, and you're absolutely right. If we hadn't done it, goodness knows what we'd be paying out in electricity. But I would say that if any councillor spots overnight one sodium lamp that's been overlooked, please let us know, because it's a lot easier to spot them at night than it is at daytime, and we can't afford to send people out to go and drive around and check at night. So if they spot a sodium one, or one that they're in any question about, drop us a line either to Em and me, or the gang, or any of the officers, and we'll pick it up and we'll find out. But I'm very tempted to put Emma on the spot and say, are they going to do Andrew Road now, Emma? Because it's very embarrassing when I walk down to the train station.
I'll have to give you a written response on that, Cabinet Member. I'd also say, not only if you see a sodium one, but if you see one now on in the daytime, please report it for us, because we don't do the spots checks, because we are actually paying now per what we use, as opposed to a fixed price per unit. So if you see one that's sparkling on in the day, making the place look really attractive, and it's not a Christmas light, it's an LED light, if you could let us know about that by the reported, that would be really useful. Obviously my teams do that, but they're not always out in the pitch of night. And I'll come back to you, Councillor King, on Andrew Road.
Okay, thanks, Emma. And I think that's a bit of a reminder for all of us, if we do see any lights on, is to sort of report that in. It is important. Andy, did you want to come back for one last question or comment?
Yeah. Thanks, Chair. It is one last very quick one, and I'm like a salmon to a fly, I'm afraid. I can't let Councillor Burnett say that about Brexit, and all our woes are to do with Brexit. I know she's a Remainer, but I think that's unnecessary. I think everybody understands that Great Britain, was actually a net contributor to the common market, the EU fund, one of only two, I believe, and that basically Britain as a whole will be better off out of the EU, and that the extra money that we won't be contributing to the EU will be redistributed under the Levelling Up programme that the government is intending to put in. And actually, whether the Welsh Government actually then passes that on to local councils in the way that they should, that's another issue altogether. But okay, I do object to Brexit being used as a weapon like that.
Okay, your comments are appropriately noted. Ruba, did you want to come in?
Yes, because I can't let Councillor Robertson, attack. I think Liz mentioned Brexit, but she didn't say it was Brexit. However, Liz can defend herself. The fact is that none of what Councillor Robertson has said about Brexit and the effects of it are borne out by anything that's happening. We know that our energy costs are up. We know that Wales is now underfunded, and that the UK government are not providing match funding for all those farmers in Wales. So, let's be factual, Councillor Robertson, and not talk nonsense.
Right, okay, I'm going to stop that discussion.
I'm a farmer in Wales.
Okay, thank you, Andy. I'm going to stop that discussion.
Just a point of information, Chair, that Wales was a net beneficiary of the EU. It's all very well blathering on about the United Kingdom, but that sort of statistic is a bit like saying I've got 1 foot in a vat of boiling oil, another foot in a ice cold bath, and therefore on average I'm comfortable. It's utterly irrelevant. Wales has missed out massively by not being in the EU. Thank you.
Barnett formula.
And Chair, I can also confirm that I was told by the Secretary of State that Wales would not get a penny less than we got from Europe, which is about, I think, if I'm right, £365 million, and we've seen nothing like it. So so Levelling Up Fund is not the panacea, and we're not getting the money that we used to get from the EU at all. Sorry,
absolutely.
Okay, I am going to stop the conversation. I think we could actually discuss this all evening. and then I'm tempted to join in. I'm not going to do that as chair. I'm going to stay neutral-ish.
I could give you one more figure as well. Is that the leadership team's increase in directors is 0.1% of the budget.
Okay, thank you, Neil. And I think that is actually quite important, or it's very important actually. It's actually a small amount, and really is what they're actually going to bring in will be an awful lot more than that. Right, okay, now we've got the cost pressures there in front of us. Has anybody got any sort of views about what they would like looked at? I mean, to me, whether it's worth exploring on number 5 about the coastal resorts, and obviously our coastal resorts, it's so important that they are pristine for our visitors who come here. Can that be looked at? Can that be done as a bit of a mix in a slightly different way? I don't know the answers to that, but whether that's something that could be explored, whether it could be part paid staff and part voluntary, a little bit like our libraries, that it becomes a community facility, or sort of, you know, that cleansing. That's just a thought that I've just put in there, but whether that could be looked at, I don't know the answers around that, and I don't know how feasible that would actually be. But whether that, because obviously that's quite a big cost pressure there as well. And I mean, we're between the devil and deep blue sea, I think, with the highways. If we don't do them, it leads to further deterioration. If we do them, it takes a lot of money. And we all want decent roads to drive on and to walk on, and streets. So it's all very difficult. So I don't know if anybody's got any other thoughts. Gwyn, did you want to come in?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Madam Chairman, I should say, just made you a mayor then.
Thanks very much.
we've got to take into consideration number 6, the SUD, sustainable drainage, because that is a legislation now, and that is a statutory need. We've got a lot of the statutory needs first. Obviously, our highways and waste, that's got to be considered priorities, as we need to keep those ticking over rapidly. So I think, you know, really we got to look at the statutory and the ones that are needed most. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Gwyn. It's around that priorities, isn't it? Well, the trouble is that I suppose they've all got their priority, but it's obviously the statutory has to come first, because that's what we're legally bound to do. And I say unfortunate, you know, a lot of the services that we provide are not, which is making some very difficult decisions then. So has anybody got any other thoughts, or just that I suppose we could pass it on to Corp, that, you know, that around that sort of prioritising the statutory, and then also then about looking in detail for all those other cost pressures, about whether they can be done differently, if you know, because that would help then relieve some of it. Has anybody got any thoughts? Neil, did you want to come back in?
If you don't mind. There is one issue. You've raised the issue of coastal resorts, and clearly one of the ways we have income from that is through our car parking, and we have a car parking charge, as everybody knows. We've done the work in terms of residential parking, so maybe the next scheme should be we should have ANPR at Nels Point and Harbour Road, which may then encourage more people to come and actually pay for the time that they're there. Now, I see no reason why we shouldn't, to be honest, and I would have thought maybe that's one way of doing it, and that would obviously have a cost to install it, but maybe that's an investor save something that, and I don't know whether committee would think that's a good idea or not, because I do.
Mm-hmm. That's an interesting suggestion there.
Yeah, Chair, as the local member, it's a very interesting suggestion, one that is worth considering.
Yeah, right. So is everybody happy if we put that forward, actually, obviously for further investigation? These are no decisions as such as yet, but obviously that has to be worth, I think that has to be worth looking at, and that's backed up obviously with Stefan as the local member for further investigation around that. Yeah. And then really, I think for everything else is what else can be done differently. I think it's not just a simple case of like cutting that service. This is about thinking outside that box and actually, can we deliver this in a different way? And sometimes I think heads around a table can do that, as we did with the libraries. As I said, wasn't easy, and it was painful at times, but we did actually get there. So has anybody else got any other thoughts or suggestions, or are we happy with that? We're not happy. Are we satisfied to go forward with that at the present time? Yes? Okay, all right. Well, thank you everybody for your input. We've had a really important discussion there. And thank you, Neil, Peter and Liz for coming along and helping us there in our deliberations. This is a very difficult time and it's not going to get any easier for the near future. I think that's one thing we can actually be sure of, unfortunately, and particularly now with the Omicron variant as well. That is it's going to further impact on our budgets without a doubt, and obviously around our staffing around that as well. Okay, so if we're content with that for now, we're going to move on to the third report, Matthew, which are the initial capital programme proposals 2023 and through then to 26 to 27. So do you want to take us through that?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Okay, so yeah, the next report is focused on capital for the next 5-year programme. And the recommendation is, again, that Scrutiny consider the initial capital programme proposals for 22-23 to 26-27. And again, forward any recommendations through the Corporate Performance and Resources Scrutiny Committee. So overall, obviously a similar story to that of the revenue budget, in that the provisional settlement will not be known until the 21st December. So at the moment, we're obviously still, not fully aware of the budget for next year. So again, we've asked for capital bids from all the services within the council. So again, we can start discussing those capital bids and prioritising bids, etc. In readiness for when we know the settlement. So for the purpose of the report, the level of capital funding assumed for next year is the same amount as we've received this year from Welsh Government. So that's been assumed at just over 6.8 million for 22-23, and that's made up of 3.4 million general capital grant and 3.4 million supported borrowing from Welsh Government. So Appendix 1 to the report shows the initial capital proposals for the next 5 years, as was approved back in March 21, and includes any subsequent approvals that we've had since that date. So in addition to funding provided from Welsh Government, the council also funds part of the programme from its own resources, from things such as capital receipts and also from reserves. So the table shown at paragraph 2.6 of the report shows the net funding required for the 22-23 capital programme, and that level is currently 62.2 million. So as I said, capital bids have been invited from all services for the next 5 years, and in total 40 bids were submitted across the council, totaling just over 16 million for next financial year, and in total there were over 31 million of bids for the 5-year period. With regard to this committee, the bids totaled 10.7 million for 22-23 and nearly 24 million for the next 5 years. We had the majority of bids within this area, because we do have, such as the roads, we have a lot of assets, a lot of buildings, so obviously a lot of capital bids required for those assets. So as I mentioned, the bids are shown at Appendix 2 to the report. And I said just over 10 million in total for next year. Again, they're not shown in any sort of priority order as such. However, most of the larger bids are towards the top. Again, we've mentioned resurfacing already. Also a lot of money in there for waste management, to complete the Atlantic train estate, and also to base fleet parking up at the Atlantic train estate as well, for example. So there's a lot of quite large bids in there for this area. Same as the revenue pressures. Obviously, fully aware that not all of these bids can be funded. However, again, they're assessed according to priority and a risk assessment taken on them as well. And quite a lot of the bids are sort of health and safety requirements as well. So, a lot of them may be required to be funded in some way or another. As I said, the next stage again is for committee to make any recommendations on the bids. Again, either supporting the bids or suggesting ways in which the bids could be changed or made less, and then again fed back into the Corporate Resources Scrutiny Committee. Again, the same sort of timetable as the revenue budget for reporting. So again, initial proposals will be reported to Cabinet for the 14th of February. Again, that will go back to scrutiny on the 17th of February, Corporate Resources Scrutiny, in readiness for final budget proposals on the 28th of Feb, and again reported to Council on the 7th of March. So again, obviously, as soon as we know the provisional settlement, again, a lot of decisions to be made, and a lot of decisions around the priorities of the bids to be made. As I said, we're fully aware that we can't fund all these bids going forward. Okay, that's a brief overview. So if any questions, then take those now.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, thanks. Gwyn, you were first to speak.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I would urge members to support the one reference Poverton Road removal of retaining wall. This is an issue which is a health and safety issue. Officers are currently monitoring this wall continually, because you've got heavy trees growing in the wall and the stone wall is breaking up. And basically the roots of the trees are going down into the wall, and periodically the wall is breaking away. So we're moving the stones away as they break. Now, sometime along the line, this is going to collapse. And this is a main road into Lantford Major. There could be fatalities on this. And I would urge members to support this one, because it is a health and safety issue which we are concerned about locally. Children walk the pavements. It's a safe route to school. Children walk the pavements along this road. And subsequently, with the storms that we've just been having earlier this period in November, and certainly, we get a few of them throughout the winter, and it may mean that we'll have to dive into reserves quickly to resolve a major issue. So I would ask members to support this particular one. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Gwyn. Emma, did you want to just sort of comment about sort of how high up the priority list that one is?
I think most of mine are high priority. Sorry, I'm not going to be that helpful, Councillor Brooks. Apologies. So a lot of the bids you see there for me today are, as Councillor John has said, are quite often bids that have risk attached to them. So, for example, the wall that Councillor John has just explained extremely well is a risk if it falls down. The roads are obviously a risk, an insurance risk if we can't keep up and maintain them, and that our insurance costs could get greater. and things like our community centres and some of our structures in terms of the structures on Barrie Island and such like, there are problems in them that we need to do. What I just like to say is obviously the bridge one that you see there on that list, that is just one of about £10 million of backlog we've got in terms of work that's needed on bridge structures. So what we've done is we haven't chucked everything at you. We've chucked what we think is absolutely needed for our area. The issue we have is we have a lot of assets, unfortunately, which are requiring quite substantial funding. So in terms of priorities, it's really difficult for me. I would always say waste and highways were top priority, just purely because of the statutory nature of the services, but also because of the risk and the insurance risk that may come with that. But with waste, particularly with the public reputation risk, because obviously it's a service that every household receives. So those would be the ones I'd be pushing, and I'd include the wall that Councillor John has mentioned, which again is an issue that has just come up over the last year.
Yeah. Okay. Lovely.
So sorry, that's not much help, Chairs. Apologies.
No, I think that is quite helpful, because I think you could include that comment when it goes forward to corporate resources about when because obviously there is going to have to be a time where there's going to be choice about what can be funded and what can't be.
I mean, I quite like the idea of you looking at statutory services, obviously, and also where there's a risk to another service. That would be something I would promote. But I also understand the other arguments that you have to do some of the nice to-dos as well, because that's also important for well-being in the area. But my biggest concern are my structures and my infrastructure, and obviously the concern associated with that to deliver on the capital programme, but not any particular priorities.
Okay. No, I think those were actually very useful comments. Andy, did you want to come in?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Basically, I'd like to address what's a little bit of an elephant in the room here, which is we always come up against this problem of having to set the budget, set the precept, and the problem is that we never know what the settlement from the Welsh Government is. Is there any way that we as a local authority can get together with other local authorities to ask the Welsh Government whether it wouldn't be possible to change the timetable so we actually have more time and more understanding of what our actual income's going to be before we have to address the problem of the budget and the precept? It seems crazy to me that we're always really up against it. We never know exactly what's going to happen. Surely the local authorities as a whole in Wales could get together and ask the Welsh Government to change the timetable on this. It just doesn't make sense the way it is at the moment. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you. I do know that this is something the Welsh Local Government Association has raised on numerous occasions. I'm very aware of that. But Neil, did you want to just elaborate on that?
Yeah, I could if you want to. Yes, it is a situation that has been raised, but through the Welsh Local Government Association, through all the leaders. One of the problems is the Welsh Government can't set their budgets until Westminster sets their budgets, and that's the biggest problem. Until Westminster set their own budget and therefore work out what the Barnett formula will be and how much Wales is going to get, Wales can't set its own budget. And there is the dilemma. So it isn't down to Welsh Government, with all due respect, it's down to UK Government. Sorry to say that, but it's true.
Okay, thank you, Neil. Ruba, did you want to come in?
Yes, thanks, Chair. Emma, really, I'm pleased that the Kimmins there, because that was one of the issues I raised early on about sort of maintaining the property. So I'm hoping, like Councillor John, that one is going to stay a priority to, in order to for it not to be a sort of have a greater impact, I suppose, longer down the line. But I suppose my question was going to be, are we any further forward in terms of looking at the use of that property? Because it seems to me as well, I suppose the sooner we can move on that, may have an implication in terms of our costs on that, of the maintaining of that building at the Kimin.
Chair, I can't take that question. I know that the bid is very important to keeping it watertight. I don't know if Marcus can take it. Do you know, have the answer, Marcus?
Chair, that there is a board that's set up to deal with that, but I can't really answer that question either. So that would be a question for, and the board consists of a number of officers and representatives across the piece. So neither Emma nor I would be able to answer that question, I'm afraid.
Okay, sorry, Rue, we haven't got the answer to with that one.
Chair, I think that's going to be a policy issue because it's property, and as it's property, then that's got to be dealt with in that way, and also look at the fact that what you're going to do with it in the future. So we did try some things with it, but clearly something will have to be done to it, but it'll usually be done by a policy, and because it's through policy, because it's property. Sorry, I think that's right. That Marcus can correct me if I'm wrong. I think that's the way it would be.
Sorry, Chair. All I was asking was the process. Really, I wasn't asking for specific information. It was really about the process. So how because I realise what's passed already. And we didn't proceed with any of the bids then, but it's really a sense of getting a sense of the process really going forward.
Right, okay.
So
Chair,
go on.
Sorry, who wants to go?
Do you want me just to say? I mean, it's probably better that the board prepares a response to the councillor and comes back through there rather than this forum. Because, as I say, there are a number of different moving pieces there, so we can certainly ensure the response is considered.
Great, I look forward to that.
We were going to say the same thing, Chair.
Yeah, thanks very much. That's excellent. Okay, we've got no other speakers. I think Emma, you made some very relevant points there that I think that can go from this committee over to the corporate performance, obviously from when they're going to be reviewing this, and about that, asking them to prioritise around obviously what are the statutory services, and also around about the risk and the safety to people. Yes, I totally agree. We do like the nice things, of course we all do, because obviously they enhance and improve our lives, and obviously in the communities that we live in. But I do think that it has to be that priority is around about public safety. So I think, are we all happy to ask corporate resources to prioritise that? Obviously, if they can put some nice touches in as well, obviously that would be greatly appreciated as well. Are we happy with that? Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Right. Thank you, Matthew, for your reports, and thanks for your input and your help there with those. So thank you. Okay, going to move on then to item 8, which is report of the Managing Director. And this is the annual delivery plan monitoring report, not to be confused with the first report that we had, which is the Q2 performance 21 to 22. And I think, Emma and Marcus, you're going to do a double act for us. I'm not sure who's going to go first.
To be fair, I'm gonna go through it with you if that's okay. And obviously, Marcus and I are both here to answer any questions. I'm not going to go through the presentation this evening because I know members have seen the presentation on a number of occasions. What I'm going to do is go through what the main problem areas are, which I'm sure is what you'll be interested in scrutinising. So, as the chair has said, the report that you've got before you tonight is Q2 of the annual delivery plan, and that covers the period 1st of April to 30th of September. And it's in relation, obviously, to the performance this year, unlike the earlier item, which was looking at the annual delivery plan for next year. Overall, it's good news. It shows a green status. And the report that you've got before you, if you remember, covers everything. So it covers all of the items for all of the areas on all of the scrutiny committees. But in terms of this particular committee, there are 102 planned activities. And of that 102 planned activities, the majority of them, 97, are identified as green, and just 5 are identified as red. And those particular 5 that are identified as red can be found at the top of Appendix C, which is on page 39 of your of 181, so page 39 of your appendix your report. And if I just quickly run through those ones that aren't green, so RPA009, which is to do with work with volunteers to deliver a range of regeneration, rights of way and country parks projects such as Vale Ambassadors and Barrie Place Board, and secure a replacement programme for creative rural communities. As has already been said, the issues with that are about capacity building, and I think, as you've seen this evening, there are a number of bids from Marcus's area to try and enhance that capacity in order that some of those initiatives can be progressed. The second one that has slipped is to deliver a travel training programme to help support the independence of young people with disabilities, increasing the use of active travel options, including public transport, and reducing the long-term financial cost to statutory services. There have been issues to do with COVID, which have meant that's been delayed. The next one is NSA 032, and that's to do with continuing to develop a more environmentally sustainable fleet, including the use of hybrid, alternative fueled and electric vehicles. Although to the 30th of September that was slip, I think this will move to green, and I think Marcus and myself have been doing quite a bit of work in this area, and I would hope that we would have some good news for you on this in terms of some of the rollout of electric cars, electric taxis and EV charging points, and some work that we're also doing in terms of on-street charging. So I'm hoping, although that's a red at the moment, that will move into a nicer colour moving forward. And there's NSA 037 and NSA 050. The first one of those is to do with SUDS, which was mentioned earlier, sustainable drainage systems. And it's purely a capacity issue. That means we haven't been able to progress that to date. We've had a number of staffing issues within there. Although it says non-COVID related, actually the staffing issues have been COVID related, which has meant we haven't been able to progress that. And the last one, NSA 050, is to revise the local flood risk management strategy, and that is on hold at the moment because we're waiting for the latest guidance from Welsh Government. In terms of the performance measures for this committee, there are 7 quarterly measures, and the majority of those have got a green performance, 5, and there's only 2 that weren't green. And the first one of that is the LED street lights, and obviously we've spoken about that to committee, and I know one of the councillors has raised the 70% issue in the 8th of November, which is obviously in this appendix, but obviously we've now finished that rollout. And the other one is CPM 117, which isn't actually showing on Appendix C, but it is actually a red. And it is shown at the penultimate page of this report, and it's to do with beach awards. And we've managed to retain all of our awards with the exception of the blue flag at Whitmore Bay, which unfortunately we couldn't apply for, as at the time it didn't meet the required level of water quality from the 2020 testing. So that has meant we have slipped in that area not through any fault necessarily of our own, but hopefully we'll be back on target with that next year. So all I've done there is pick out the ones that are falling before performance, but obviously Marcus and I both here this evening to take any questions you might have on the remainder of the report.
Okay, thank you for that, Emma. I mean, in light of everything that's been happening over this last year or so, and the pressures that are on the council as well, and all the staff, I think you've actually done remarkably well. You know, the majority of everything is green, and I think that's an accolade for the commitment that all the staff have shown in making sure to keep up those standards. Right, Andy, did you want to speak?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I've got a couple of questions. Do you want me to shoot off all the questions first, or should I do them one at a time? It might be better to do one at a time, actually. RP on page 18, RP of the Appendix C, RPA 004. What are the 3 substantial pieces of work that we're tendering for?
Emma, are you able to enlighten Andy there, or Marcus?
That's me, sorry, Chair. That is a bid we've put out to consultants to develop a strategy for the council around a master plan for Barrie. Which also will include a bid to the Levelling Up Fund, and finally some investment schemes to follow with that bid. So it's essentially a 3-stage process to allow us to make a bid for the Levelling Up Fund and also the Shared Prosperity Fund beyond that. And it'll be a 10-year programme that will flow from that work.
Thanks, Marcus. So that's not actually any infrastructure projects or developments or anything. It's purely bids to attract more money into the council. Yeah.
It is. It's. We hope that there will be infrastructure that flows from it, but that's money at the moment just to make a bid to the UK government.
Yeah, thanks for that. Okay, on page 19, the refresher. Sorry, this is still Appendix C, and it's HRA 002. How many EU, EEA, and Swiss nationals do we have working for the council who were approached?
I'm not actually sure that that's a question we can answer off the top of our head.
Chair, I think that's actually a corporate performance and resources responsibility, not any. I know it's down there, but it's not for us.
Mm. Yeah. Okay, Andy, have you got another question?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Basically, it's page 59 of Appendix C, and it's NSA010. Subject to obtaining WG funding, continue to progress the well-tagged studies which deliver transport improvements for Penarth, Cardiff Bay, M4 Junction 34 to A48 and Dennis Paris. Is that all to do with active travel, or is there anything more exciting in the pipeline?
Yeah, sorry, I was just getting up on my screen. Yeah, it's been superseded slightly because obviously there's been some policy decisions over the last year in terms of the M4, so it would only be active travel or public transport related now. It wouldn't be new roads or such, like, if that's what you're asking. Sorry, I'm guessing what you're asking.
Thanks, Emma.
Previous questions, yeah.
So we're talking cycle paths and walkways for 80-year-olds. Okay, great.
Yeah. No, so let me clarify the position so it doesn't sound totally ridiculous. Although an 80-year-old could ride an electric bike quite easily, but we won't go into that. So when we originally did this and originally set these up, obviously on the cards was the Junction 34 M4 Junction 34, the potential road there and the train. That has obviously changed now. So, but we still obviously got aspirations in terms of the regeneration regeneration work that Marcus's team does in terms of getting better links up to the M4 and Cardiff and onwards. So just because that scheme isn't there, it doesn't mean that that desire doesn't go, that desire goes away. It's just that we've got to be a bit more creative in how we deliver that desire, if that makes sense.
Yeah, thanks, Emma. Okay, RPA 013 on page 60. Which developments is the section 106 money coming from?
Well, I think you'd have to put that question very specifically. I can't answer that question here, I'm afraid. There are a number of Section 106 contributions that will be feeding into that pot. So we would have to look into that if you and come back to you. But I mean, obviously, the vast majority of housing developments will feed into that pot in different areas, and they will cover a number of different schemes. So I don't know if Emma, is there any way you could? Is there any other?
Yeah. So sorry.
I'll tell you why I'm asking. I think a lot of councillors are concerned that 106 money from developments in their areas are actually going off to be used in other areas. Could you say that's not happening?
Well,
they would have restrictive use, wouldn't they, Marcus? So they wouldn't be used necessarily.
Yeah, and if I can quickly explain, the only time that Section 106 contributions tend to be used for wider areas is sometimes in respect of education, and sometimes in respect of affordable housing, and in those cases there would always be a consultation process that would follow it. Where we have contributions which are made for sustainable transport links, they will have to be associated with the development itself. And there's only one caveat to that, is that as part of the Green Links programme, there's a small percentage that comes off, which is used right throughout the Vale of Glamorgan. I mean, that would come off every sustainable transport contribution. But bar that, every contribution will be used in association with the development it is being brought in from, or very close to it.
Okay, Andy, I think
thanks, Marcus.
If you've got any specific, if you've got any specific around that, you've got any concerns about to speak to the Section 106 officer if you've got a specific. All right.
Yeah. Well, I'll have a chat with Charlotte about it.
Yeah.
Okay. One last question. It's relating to page 64. It's NSA 017. Improve structures within Dinas Parish to enhance access to existing schools and community establishments. Is this just the bridge? Is that the only thing on it?
Yeah, that's the.
Sounds very grand.
It does, doesn't it? Again, obviously, it's great news that those bridges are being sorted this year. I'm sure you'll agree. But that is what it is. So it's those bridges that have been a long time on the capital programme, but they are now hopefully coming to fruition. So it does sound grand, doesn't it?
Yeah, thank you very much, Emma. I thought it was going to be all sorts of stuff, and then I looked at the actual description, and it's just the bridge. Oh well, never mind. Thanks.
Okay. Right, we've got no other questions or queries there. As I said, I would just like to put our thanks on record, really, for the results around that quarter two, particularly in light of the difficult times that we're undergoing at the moment. So I would just like to put our thanks as a committee on record around that. I think all the questions have been answered around this now. Are we happy to receive and note that report? Yes. Okay.
Yep.
Lovely. Thank you very much. All right. I've got no other items on the agenda. So I would just like to thank everybody for their input tonight, the discussions that we've had, and to wish everybody a merry and very safe Christmas. And I hope everybody, gets to be able to enjoy their time with their families and friends in a safe way, and look forward to seeing everybody in 2022. Okay, so thank you, everybody. Good night.
Chair. All the best.
Thank you very much.
Solid
Bye.